Marcus Thorne's world was built on concrete and silence. His office was on the top floor of a building that cast a long, sharp shadow over the financial district. The city moved below him. A frantic, chaotic dance of lights and noise. Up here, there was only order. The desk was a slab of polished obsidian, reflecting the muted grey of the sky. Nothing sat on its surface except a single, leather-bound ledger and a heavy crystal glass. Marcus ran a finger down a column of numbers. They were clean. Balanced. Just like everything else in his life. His organization was not a clumsy, violent thing. It was a corporation. It had departments, logistics, and quarterly reports. It dealt in commodities the stock market never listed: influence, fear, and favors. He was the chief executive officer of it all. Tonight, there was a meeting. A necessary one. With a man who thought respect could be negotiated. Marcus needed to look a certain way. Not ostentatious. Not wealthy. Powerful. He walked from his office into the adjoining private quarters. A sprawling space of minimalist design. Cold stone, dark wood, wide panes of glass. His valet, a young man named Leo who moved with the quiet efficiency of a ghost, was already laying out a suit. It was dark charcoal, impeccably tailored. Not that one, Marcus said. His voice was low, gravelly. The sound of stones grinding together. Leo paused, his hands hovering over the silk lining. Something else, Marcus continued, walking to a vast, walk-in closet. The closet was a room in itself, lined with rows of identical dark suits and stark white shirts. A uniform. But his hand went past them. To the very back. There, hanging alone, were a few older items. Garments from a time before the corporation, before the tower. A time when his business was conducted in back alleys and dimly lit bars. He pulled out a white shirt. It was simple cotton. Not the expensive Sea Island blend he wore now. It was well-made but ordinary. He had not worn it in years. He wasn't sure why he reached for it now. A flicker of something. A ghost of a memory he could not quite grasp. This one, he said, handing it to the valet. Leo took the shirt, his expression carefully neutral. He knew better than to question a decision. He laid it across an ironing board built into the wall. The steam press hissed to life. Marcus turned to the window, looking down at the city again. He thought of the man he was meeting. Dmitry Volkov. A brute who dealt in misery. A man with no code. A soft gasp from behind him broke the silence. It was a small sound, instantly stifled. But in the quiet of the room, it was as loud as a gunshot. Marcus turned slowly. Leo, the valet, was frozen. He stared at the shirt under the press. His face was pale. "What is it?" Marcus's voice was flat. A command, not a question. "Nothing, sir." A shadowed Leo's voice trembled slightly. He was a good valet. He did not make mistakes. He did not show emotion. Marcus walked over. He looked at the shirt. At first, he saw nothing. Just the smooth, white cotton. Then Leo shifted the angle of the overhead light. And Marcus saw it. It was not a shadow. Faintly, almost invisibly, there were words. They were pressed into the very fibers of the fabric. The heat of the iron had left a ghost image, a watermark on the cotton. You could only see it when the light hit it just right. A secret hidden in plain sight. A letter. Marcus raised a hand, a gesture that stopped Leo from speaking, from breathing. He leaned closer. The words were small, the script delicate. A woman's hand. His heart, a piece of machinery he thought had seized up long ago, gave a painful, sluggish lurch. He knew that handwriting. He had not seen it in 5 years. Ilara. The maid. The girl who had moved through his cold, empty mansion like a phantom, leaving behind only the scent of lemon polish and a profound sense of quiet. She had vanished one day. No note. No warning. Just an empty room and a neatly made bed. He had told himself it did not matter. People came and went. He had lied. Marcus looked at the faint, scorched words on his shirt. A message from a ghost. A message he was never meant to find. He had spent 5 years believing she had simply left. The truth was far more complicated, and what he would do next would change everything. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will redefine the meaning of loyalty. If you enjoy stories about second chances, like this video. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what we have coming. And let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now, let's get back to it. Marcus Thorne was 48 years old. To the city, he was a myth. A whisper. A name spoken to frighten rivals or reassure partners. He owned shipping lines, construction firms, and waste management companies. Legitimate businesses that ran on illegitimate capital. He was a predator, but one with rules. His world was a brutal ecosystem, and he was at the top of the food chain. He understood that for the ecosystem to survive, there had to be balance. Rule number 1: no collateral damage. The innocent were off limits. Their worlds were not to be touched. Wives, children, civilians, they were a protected species. To harm one was to invite a wrath that was absolute. Rule number 2: a deal was a covenant. A man's word was the only currency with real value. To break it was to become bankrupt in the only way that mattered. Rule number 3: loyalty was not a strategy, it was a sacrament. Betrayal was the only sin for which there was no forgiveness. These were not laws written on paper. They were carved into the bedrock of his empire. Every man who worked for him, from the button-down accountants to the hard-faced men who stood by his side, understood them. This code was not born of morality. It was born of loss. 20 years ago, Marcus Thorne had loved a woman. Her name was Isabel. She was not part of his world. She was a librarian. She smelled of old paper and vanilla. She had seen the man, not the monster, and had loved him for it. A rival, a man with no code, had used her to get to him. It had not worked. It had only unleashed something terrible. When it was over, the rival and his entire organization were gone. Erased from the city's memory. And Isabel was gone, too. A casualty of a war she never knew she was in. Her loss had hollowed him out. It had forged the man he was now. A man who built walls of concrete and silence. A man who understood that love was a liability he could no longer afford. He bought the mansion after that. A cold, granite fortress on the edge of the city. He filled it with expensive things, but it remained empty. He lived there, but he was not home. And then, 6 years ago, Elara Vance had arrived. She was hired by his household manager. One of a dozen staff who kept the vast estate running. She was young. 22, perhaps. Quiet. Unassuming. She was supposed to be invisible. All the staff were. They were trained to move through the house without leaving a trace, to be present but unseen. But Marcus saw her. He saw her in the library, tracing the spines of his old books with a gentle finger, her expression one of reverence. He had a first edition of Moby Dick, a book Isabel had loved. Elara would dust it with a different cloth, a softer one, as if she knew it was special. He saw her in the garden, tending to a small patch of lavender bushes that the professional gardeners ignored. They were the only thing that grew there with any color. One morning, he came into his home study to find a single sprig of that lavender placed in a small bud vase on the corner of his desk. It was a breach of protocol. A shocking one. His security chief, a man named Roman, had wanted to fire her on the spot. Marcus had said no. He had not understood why. The flower remained. It was replaced every 2 days, a silent, fragrant conversation. She never spoke to him directly, beyond a whispered good morning, so that her eyes would always be fixed on the floor. She was terrified of him, as she should be. But her action spoke a different language. The way she organized his papers not by date, but by subject, showing an intuitive understanding of his work. The way his coffee was always the perfect temperature, a detail no one else had ever mastered. She was a whisper of warmth in his glacial existence. A flicker of light under a door he had long since bolted shut. He found himself watching for her, listening for the soft fall of her footsteps in the hallway. He recognized the danger. Not to his business. To himself. She was innocence. She was everything he had lost. Everything he had sworn to never let near him again. She was Isabel, reborn in a different form. A reminder of a life he could not have. And then, one Tuesday morning, she was gone. Her room was immaculate. Her few belongings packed. She had collected her final paycheck the day before. The household manager said she had resigned, citing a family matter. There was no lavender on his desk. The house fell silent again. The silence was heavier this time. More profound. Marcus had ordered a cursory check. Julian, his most trusted lieutenant, had reported back that she and her family had moved out of state. They had left no forwarding address. Marcus had accepted it. He had told himself it was for the best. She had escaped his world. She was safe. He had buried the memory of her, locking it away in the same cold vault where he kept the memory of Isabel. Now, 5 years later, her ghost had returned. Etched onto a shirt he had almost forgotten he owned. He dismissed the shaken valet with a curt nod. Leave it. Alone, Marcus picked up the shirt. It was still warm. He held it to the light, turning it until the words reappeared. The script was small, precise. She must have spent hours, painstakingly folding and pressing the fabric to create the message. A message of such desperation and hope. Mr. Thorne, it began. She had never called him Marcus. I am sorry to be leaving this way. I cannot say the things I wish to say. There are no words for them that would be safe. I know you are a man who lives in a world of shadows. I have only ever been a person who cleans them away. He traced the faint line of a sentence with his thumb. I did not want to go. I want you to know that. Every day here, I saw not the man that people fear, but the man who keeps a dead flower in a vase because someone he loved once touched it. I saw the man who protects the small, forgotten things. He froze. The dead flower. He had a single, pressed rose in a small frame on his nightstand. A gift from Isabel, from their first date. No one knew about it. No one. But Ilara had. She must have seen it while cleaning his private rooms. And she had understood. His breath caught in his throat. The letter continued. I do not know much about love. But I think it feels like the way I felt when I made sure your coffee was warm. Or when I found a book you had been looking for. It is a quiet thing. A service. A prayer. I am leaving because my world cannot survive in yours. And I cannot bear to bring your shadows into mine. It is the only way I can protect you. And perhaps, a small part of myself. I will not ask you to remember me. But please know, in a world that is often cold, you were a source of unexpected warmth for me. For that, I will be forever grateful. Goodbye. Ilara. Marcus read the words again. And again. This was not a resignation. This was a confession. A farewell. A love letter of the most tragic kind. She had left to protect him. The thought was a physical blow. In his world, protection was his domain. It was something he provided, not something he received. Especially not from a wisp of a girl who was afraid to meet his gaze. He had spent 5 years believing a lie. A comfortable lie. That she had left, moved on, found a happy life far away from him. The truth was in his hands. She had fled. And she had loved him. The machinery in his chest, the rusted, frozen thing, began to turn. grinding away 5 years of ice and indifference. A feeling he had not felt since Isabel's death began to thaw. Regret. Deep, profound, and agonizing. He had let her go. He had seen the light she carried and he had done nothing to shield it. He had let her walk out of his fortress and back into a world that was far crueler than his own. The meeting with Volkov was forgotten. The ledgers, the numbers, the entire empire faded into the background. There was only this shirt. This ghost. He had a choice. He could fold the shirt, put it away, and return to the silence. He could honor her wish, her sacrifice. He could let her go, for good this time. That was the logical move. The safe one. It was the Marcus Thorne move. Or he could break every rule he had ever made for himself. He could tear down the walls he had spent 20 years building. He could step out of the shadows and into the light she represented, if only for a moment. He could find her. It was not a logical decision. It was not a business decision. It was an earthquake. A fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of his soul. The man who had lost Isabel could not bear the thought of having failed to protect Ilara. The code was absolute. The innocent were to be protected. She had been in his house. Under his roof. That made her his responsibility. A responsibility he had unknowingly abdicated 5 years ago. He would correct that mistake. Marcus walked back to his obsidian desk. He pressed a single button on an intercom. Julian. My office. Now. There was no hesitation. No, yes, sir, just the soft click of the line disconnecting. Seconds later, the door opened. Julian entered. He was a man in his late 30s, dressed as impeccably as Marcus. He had been with Marcus for 15 years, rising from a driver to his most trusted advisor. He was the only man alive who knew about Isabel. He was the executor of Marcus's will and the keeper of his secrets. His face was a mask of professional calm, but his eyes were sharp. He saw the charcoal suit laid out on the bed. He saw the ironing press, still warm. And he saw the old cotton shirt clutched in Marcus's hand. He waited. Find her, Marcus said, his voice raw. Julian's composure did not break, but a flicker of surprise crossed his features. So. Ilara Vance. Marcus's gaze was hard, intense. The maid. She left 5 years ago. Julian's mind worked quickly, accessing a mental file he thought had been permanently archived. I remember. We confirmed she and her family moved to Oregon. Her father retired. That was the story, Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. It was not the truth. He did not show Julian the shirt. He did not explain. He did not need to. The look in his eyes was enough. Julian had only seen that look once before. In the days after Isabel's death. This was not business. This was a crusade. Use everything, Marcus commanded. Financial records, surveillance, informants. I want to know where she is. I want to know if she is safe. I want to know everything. I want it yesterday. Julian's surprise melted away, replaced by steel. Understood. He knew the implications. To mobilize the full resources of the organization for a personal matter, for a former domestic employee, was unprecedented. It broke every protocol. It would raise questions. But he also knew the tone in Marcus's voice. It was the sound of an avalanche starting. One more thing, Marcus said, as Julian turned to leave. So. Cancel my meeting tonight with Volkov. Julian nodded. A reason? Marcus's eyes were cold fire. Tell him I am attending to a matter of honor. He wouldn't understand. Julian left, closing the door softly behind him. Marcus stood alone in the vast, silent room. He looked down at the shirt in his hand, at the secret it had held for so long. 5 years. 5 years she had been out there alone. 5 years he had been sitting in his tower, believing she was safe. The regret was a poison. The only antidote was action. The information came back faster than Marcus expected. Julian was efficient. His network was a web of whispers and shadows that covered the entire country. He could find anyone. It took for hours. For hours that Marcus spent pacing the length of his office, the cotton shirt laid out on his desk like a sacred text. He did not eat. He did not drink. He just waited. At 11 p.m., Julian returned. His face was grim. "I found her," he said, without preamble. Marcus stopped pacing. He stood very still. "Where?" "She is here." In the city, Julian's voice was tight. "She never went to Oregon. The family sold their house 5 years ago, but they never left town. They moved to a small apartment in the industrial sector." The industrial sector. A blighted, forgotten part of the city. A place of rust and desperation. "Why?" Marcus asked. The single word was heavy with unspoken questions. "Her father, Thomas Vance," Julian began, consulting a tablet. "He was a carpenter. A good one. But he developed a degenerative nerve condition. He couldn't work. The medical bills piled up. They lost everything." Julian paused, his eyes meeting Marcus's. He got desperate. He took a loan. Marcus did not need to ask from whom. There was only one predator who hunted in that part of the city with such viciousness. "Volkov," Marcus said. It was not a question. Julian nodded. "Dmitry Volkov." The initial loan was $50,000. With his interest rates, the debt is now over $250,000 each. The air in the room grew cold. Colder than the granite walls. "Thomas Vance passed away 2 years ago," Julian continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "The debt transferred to his only next of kin. Ilara." "Yes," Julian swiped the screen of the tablet. "She has been working it off. Volkov owns a number of establishments. She works at one of them. The Starlight Lounge." The Starlight Lounge. Marcus knew the place. It was a grimy bar with private rooms in the back. A place where Volkov's men conducted their filthiest business. It was a place of indentured servitude. A prison. She had left his home to protect him. And she had walked straight into hell. The rage that filled Marcus was a white-hot, silent inferno. It was a pure, clean rage he had not felt in 20 years. It burned away the regret, leaving only a terrible, crystalline purpose. Volkov. The man he was supposed to meet tonight. The man who disrespected his code. The man who preyed on the weak, the desperate. The man who had taken Ilara's light and tried to extinguish it in the grime of his pathetic little empire. He had put his hands on something that belonged to Marcus. Not the woman. The principle. The plan formed in his mind instantly. It was not complex. It was brutally simple. "Get the car," Marcus said to Julian. "And get a team. For men. No weapons visible. We are not starting a war. We are collecting a debt." Julian's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "You are going yourself?" "Yes." This was the ultimate breach of protocol. The king did not leave his castle to deal with pawns. But this was not about the kingdom. This was personal. "And Julian," Marcus added. "Bring a bag. With $250,000. In cash." Julian understood. This was not just a rescue. This was a statement. The Starlight Lounge was a stain on a rundown street. Its neon sign flickered, half the letters dead. 2 of Volkov's thugs stood by the door, their cheap suits failing to hide the bulges at their waists. They saw the 2 black sedans pull up. They saw the men who got out. Men in tailored coats who moved with the unnerving calm of professionals. And then they saw Marcus Thorne step out of the back of the first car. Their bravado evaporated. They paled, stumbling back against the door. They had heard the stories. They had never imagined they would see the myth in the flesh, standing on their grimy sidewalk. Marcus walked towards them. He did not slow down. He did not acknowledge them. They scrambled to open the door, their hands trembling. "Mr. Thorne," one of them stammered. We didn't expect." Marcus walked past them as if they were furniture. Julian and the team followed, a silent, deadly procession. The inside of the bar was what he expected. Dimly lit, smelling of stale beer and desperation. A few patrons hunched over their drinks. A woman with tired eyes served them from behind a sticky bar. It was her. Ilara. She was thinner. The light in her eyes, he remembered, was dimmed, but not gone. It was there, banked like embers. She wore a simple black dress, the uniform of the place. She looked up as they entered, her gaze sweeping over them with practiced indifference, until it landed on him. Her breath hitched. The glass she was wiping slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with a terrible, raw fear. Not for herself. For him. She thought he was in danger. Here, in this place. The thought was like a key turning in a lock deep inside him. Before anyone could react, a heavy door at the back of the bar burst open. Dmitry Volkov emerged, flanked by two more of his apes. He was a large, slovenly man with a florid face and small, greedy eyes. He saw the broken glass, he saw Ilara's shocked face, and then he saw Marcus. "Thorne," Volkov boomed, a false, hearty smile stretching his lips. "You decided to reschedule our meeting after all. And you come to my humble establishment. I am honored." Marcus's gaze did not leave Ilara. He saw the way she flinched at the sound of Volkov's voice. "I am not here for a meeting, Dmitry," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. He finally turned his eyes to Volkov. The full, undivided weight of his attention. Volkov's smile faltered. He had never been looked at like this before. It was like being weighed, measured, and found wanting by a god. "I am here for her," Marcus said simply. Volkov followed his gaze to Ilara, who was standing frozen amidst the broken glass. A look of cruel understanding dawned on his face. He chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. "The girl? She is just staff. A bit of a debt to work off. You have an interest in my inventory." He smirked. "She is not for sale, Thorne. She is leverage." Marcus took a slow step forward. His men did not move, but the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. 5 years ago, Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "This woman worked in my home. She was under my roof. She was part of my household." He let the words hang in the air. In their world, the meaning was unmistakable. "She left," he continued. "And your pathetic greed found her. You put your hands on something that was connected to my world. You broke a rule, Dmitry." Volkov's face lost its color. He had thought the girl was a nobody. A carpenter's daughter. He had no idea. It was just business, he stammered, his bravado gone. "A debt?" "The debt is $250,000, Marcus stated. He nodded to Julian. Julian stepped forward and placed the heavy canvas bag on the bar with a loud thud. He unzipped it, revealing the neat stacks of cash. "There is your money," Marcus said. "The debt is paid." Volkov stared at the cash, his greedy eyes wide. Relief washed over his face. He thought this was a transaction. He reached for the bag. Marcus's hand shot out, clamping down on Volkov's wrist. His grip was like iron. Volkov cried out in pain. "You think this is about money?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, but it was more terrifying than any shout. "You think you can put a price on this?" He gestured toward Ilara. This woman showed more honor in cleaning my floors than you have shown in your entire miserable life. You took her hope and you tried to turn it into profit. You fed on her despair. Marcus leaned in closer, his eyes boring into Volkov's. My money is a settlement for her father's debt. But my payment, for your disrespect, is something else entirely. He released Volkov's wrist, shoving him back. Your business in this city is over, Dmitri, Marcus said calmly. All of it. Your clubs, your loans, your men. As of tonight, they belong to me. Volkov stared, aghast. You can't do that. I already have, Marcus replied. While we were talking, my people were making calls. Your partners have been re-educated. Your protection has been rescinded. You have nothing. He turned to his men. Escort Mr. Volkov outside. Make sure he understands the terms of his permanent retirement. The two thugs with Volkov made a move to intervene, but Marcus's men were faster. In a blur of motion, they were disarmed and neutralized, held in grips that made them gasp. Volkov was pale with terror. He knew what permanent retirement meant. Please, Thorn, he begged. Mercy. Marcus looked at him with utter contempt. You should have shown some to her. His men dragged the sputtering, terrified Volkov out of the bar and into the night. The door swung shut, leaving behind a profound silence. The only sound was the hum of the broken neon sign outside. Marcus turned to Ilara. She was still standing in the same spot, her eyes wide, filled with a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, confusion, and something else. Something he had not seen in 5 years. Hope. He walked over to her, his hard-soled shoes crunching on the broken glass. He stopped in front of her. He was a man of few words. He did not know how to say the things that were churning inside him. The regret. The apology. The fury. So he said the only thing that mattered. It's over. You are safe now. He shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders. It dwarfed her small frame. It smelled of cold night air and power. She looked up at him, her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Tears began to well in her eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of release. Come, he said softly. Let's get you out of here. He gently guided her toward the door, his hand on her back. As they walked out of the Starlight Lounge and into the clean, cold night, he knew that something fundamental had been broken. Not just Volkov's empire, but the walls around his own heart. The car ride was silent. Ilara sat huddled in the corner of the spacious back seat, wrapped in his coat. She stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. Marcus sat on the other side, watching her. He gave her the space she needed. The silence was not awkward. It was heavy with everything that had not been said for 5 years. They did not go to his mansion. They did not go to his tower. He directed the driver to a quiet, tree-lined street in one of the city's old, historic districts. They pulled up to a handsome brownstone, its windows dark. This is one of my properties, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. It's quiet here. No one will find you. He led her up the steps and unlocked the door. The interior was not like his other homes. It was warm, furnished with comfortable-looking antiques, shelves filled with books, and carpets on the polished wood floors. It felt like a home, not a fortress. He had bought it years ago, but rarely used it. He wasn't sure why he kept it. Now he knew. He led her into the living room, where a fireplace stood cold and empty. She finally turned to him, her eyes searching his face. Why, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. After all this time. Why did you do this? How could he explain? How could he tell her about a faded message on a shirt? How could he explain that her quiet, selfless words had shaken the foundations of his entire world? Instead of answering, he reached inside his suit jacket. Julian had thought to bring it. He pulled out the old cotton shirt, carefully folded, He held it out to her. She looked at it, confused. Then, as he angled it toward the light from a nearby lamp, she saw it. The faint, ghostly imprint of her own handwriting. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "You found it." "Today," he confirmed. "After 5 years." She stared at the shirt, then back at him. I never thought you would. I couldn't leave without," she trailed off, unable to finish. "I know," he said. She looked around the comfortable room, then at the powerful, dangerous man standing before her. The man who had just dismantled another man's life to save hers. "How can I ever repay you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The money in my father's debt." "The debt is settled," he said, his gaze fixed on her. He took a step closer. "But you are wrong. You are the one who paid me." She looked at him, confused. "Paid you? I have nothing." "You gave me this," he said, gesturing to the shirt he still held. "You reminded me of something I thought I had lost a long time ago. What you wrote, that was worth more than any amount of money." It was the most he had said at one time in years. The words felt foreign in his mouth, but true. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw past the fear and the power. She saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. The deep, ancient wound he carried. The same wound she had seen when she cleaned his private rooms and tended to his secrets. "What are you?" she asked, the question soft but direct. "Are you a good man? Or a bad man?" The question hung in the air between them. The ultimate question. The one he had asked himself in the dark for 20 years. He looked down at her, at the face that had haunted his quietest moments. At the woman whose simple, honest love had reached across 5 years of silence to find him. For the first time since Isabel, his mask did not just slip. It shattered. "I don't know what I am," he answered, his voice thick with an emotion he could not name. "For 20 years, I have been a man who runs a business. A man who lives by a code. Tonight." He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "Tonight," he repeated, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Because of you. I got to be a good man." Her breath caught. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. He did not wipe it away. He let his hand fall. "You are free, Ilara," he said, the formality of her name a stark contrast to the intimacy of the moment. "Volkov is gone. The debt is gone. You can have a new life. Anywhere you want. I will fund it. You will never have to worry about money again." He was offering her an escape. A clean break. It was the right thing to do. The honorable thing. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He reached into his pocket and pulled out not a business card, but a simple, old-fashioned brass key. He pressed it into her hand. "This house is yours," he said. "Stay as long as you need. The door to my world, the world of Marcus Thorne, is closed to you. For your safety." He paused, his gaze holding hers. "But the door to my home is now open. The choice is yours." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the warm, quiet room with the key in her hand and his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. 1 year later. The office in the tower was different. The obsidian desk was still there, the view of the city still sprawling below. But the room was no longer cold. A pot of lavender sat on the corner of the desk, its fragrance subtly perfuming the air. On the wall behind the desk, where a sterile, abstract painting once hung, there was now a simple, elegant frame. Inside the frame was a piece of white cotton fabric, carefully mounted. Under the gallery lighting, you could just make out the faint, ghostly words pressed into its fibers. It was a memento. A reminder. A constitution. Marcus Thorne sat at his desk, reviewing a ledger. But he was not alone. Ilara moved quietly around the office, watering the plants that now dotted the space. She was not wearing a maid's uniform. She wore a simple, elegant dress. Her hair was longer. The light in her eyes was not just rekindled. It was a bright, steady flame. She had stayed. She had not taken the escape he offered. She had chosen to walk through the door he had opened. Not into his world of shadows, but into his life. She came to stand behind him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. He leaned back, his head resting against her for a moment. A simple, profound gesture of peace. He had not changed his business. The city still whispered his name with fear and respect. He was still the man who ruled from the shadows. But the man himself had changed. The fortress had been breached. Light had found its way into the darkest rooms. The house was no longer empty. It was a home. He had recontextualized his own life. His power, his ruthlessness, they were no longer just tools for building an empire. They were tools to protect what truly mattered. They were the walls that kept the wolves away from the one piece of light he had in his life. Sometimes, the most powerful messages are not the ones that are shouted, but the ones that are whispered. A quiet confession, ironed into a shirt and hidden for 5 years, had proven to be more potent than any threat or any deal. It was a testament to the enduring power of a love that asks for nothing in return. It had been a lifeline, thrown across a sea of silence, and a man who thought he was already drowned had found the strength to grab hold of it. For it is often in protecting the vulnerable that we find our own redemption, and in a single act of courage, we can rewrite the ending of our own story.